Good morning. If there's a word to describe what happened in the past week, depending on your perspective, it could be chaos, maybe change, maybe progress. There has been a lot of whatever it is, especially when it comes to tariffs. Here to talk about that and other developments in D.C. is 4th District Congressman Jim Himes. He joins me from Washington. Congressman, welcome. I said there's a lot of different words depending on your ideology to describe this. What has it been like being in the middle of it down there? Things seem to be changing by the moment.
Yeah, they really do, which is not unusual for this administration. But, you know, there's one word that is important to an awful lot of Americans as a result of this just insane back and forth on tariffs. And that's loss in the 401ks, loss in the IRAs. I mean, yes, there was a big move in the market after the president backed off of his threats. But, you know, we are still a long way from recouping the 401k and IRA and retirement account values that were lost because of the market's absolute terror that the president might go through with his threats. Now, we still have something that is going to be enormously destabilizing, right? Which is basically prohibitive tariffs on our number 3 trade partner. That's China. And, you know, Americans really need to think hard about that, because you're probably not wearing a thing or sitting on a piece of furniture or using a piece of equipment from your iPhone to your automobile that doesn't involve a lot of imported stuff from China. And of course, China buys the products of our farmers. They buy the wheat, they buy the soybeans, they buy the pork, the chickens. And so these China tariffs all by themselves are going to impose a great deal of pain on the American public.
Now, one of the things that's been interesting to me covering everything that's been happening is none of this should come as a surprise. This is what Trump said he was going to do when he was running for office. And now that he is the president, he's doing what he said. You've been very outspoken, much more outspoken than I've heard you in the past on many other topics. Why, if this is what people voted for, why such concern if they got what they asked for?
Well, I don't think people asked for devastation in their retirement accounts, right? And let's face it, Eric, I mean, most people don't spend a lot of time day to day thinking about tariffs. And so when the president says we've been taken advantage of by countries around the world, which is actually not true, we're actually a massive exporter to a lot of places, you know, it doesn't hit home the way watching a 10% decline in your retirement fund does. And, you know, we're about to see this on a whole other topic. Just this week, the Republican House passed a budget resolution which is going to allow them to really slash at Medicaid funding. And so, you know, Medicaid, it's an abstraction, right? But when you actually see the budget that says that, you know, there's some reasonable chance that grandma's not going to be able to stay in that assisted living facility, or that some of the tens of millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid for health insurance are not going to have health insurance, that's when the chickens come home to roost.
Well, let's stick with that topic, because you went down to the House floor this past week to talk about that very thing. You wanted to introduce some of your colleagues to one of the constituents from your district who relies on Medicaid. Let's take a look at a clip quickly.
But the real threat to Connor is what's going to happen in this chamber this week as they find a way to slash Medicaid. Connor's medicines, the medicines that have kept him alive, cost thousands of dollars a month. Middle-class family can't pay that. Medicaid does. His lung function is compromised, so he needs a $12,000 machine to breathe.
Now that, of course, is Connor, one of your constituents from Ridgefield. He's 14. He has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Why did you feel it was so important to talk about Connor and people like him? Is that part of your goal, is to humanize what some of these cuts are doing?
That's exactly right, Eric. You know, 70 million Americans, more than 70 million, rely on Medicaid for their health insurance. That means there's a lot of Americans who don't, and who don't really understand what's at stake. A lot of Americans think that Medicaid is just, you know, for lower income people, for poor people. It's not, right? It is literally keeping Connor alive today. And Connor's very much a middle-class Ridgefield guy, right? And so, yes, it's about humanizing, but it's also making sure that people understand the terrible damage that will be done to some of our most vulnerable citizens if these Medicaid cuts come through. And so far, you know, the Republicans are riding a train whose destination is to really very badly damage this program, which is so important to so many people.
I want to get to some other topics, Congressman. One thing that there's been a lot of talk about is the U.S.-Iran relationship and that foreign policy of the Trump administration. Do you have concerns about where that's going?
Well, I do. I do. I happen to believe that the Israeli prime minister is hell-bent on attacking Iran, and he's going to try to persuade the American president to be part of that. Now, this president has been famously, and I'll give him this much credit, he's been famously opposed to getting involved in foreign wars. And, again, we've been talking a lot about the cost that will hit the American public. If there's a war in the Persian Gulf and oil markets are disrupted, stand by for $4, $5, $6, $7 gasoline prices. So I am very worried by the prospect of a military conflict against Iran. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe, President Trump promised us this in his first term, but maybe in his second term is the time where he actually gets a nuclear deal done with Iran. It's never too smart to be overly optimistic about what can happen in the Middle East, but the stakes are very, very high.
And speaking of military, there's a lot of talk about military budgets in the Trump administration. That's particularly important in Connecticut with so many of our industrial bases being Pratt & Whitney's and other companies that do things specifically for military budgets, Electric Boat, another one. What's your feel on where that's going with military spending and Trump?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, as you pointed out at the start of the interview, it's a day in and day out thing. The chaos just you just never really know where you are on things like military budgets. But what I can tell you is that the 5 members of the House and the 2 senators from the state of Connecticut are going to do everything we can to make sure that the very best manufacturers on the planet, keeping our warfighters safe in Sikorsky helicopters, in Virginia-class submarines up in New London, and building the jet aircraft, the engines that power the F-35, amongst other, these are not, commodity manufacturing people. These are some of the most talented people in the world. We're going to make sure that the Pentagon recognizes that and takes care of the unbelievable defense workers in the state of Connecticut.
We talked about how much tariffs are part of the conversation. We only have about a minute left with you, Congressman, but I just want to ask you about all these deportations. That's another thing Trump trumpeted from the campaign trail, that he was going to step up these deportations. We've seen these folks take in supposed gang members, according to the Trump administration, to an El Salvadorian prison. What is your concern with that program? Do you have concerns? And what will we see going forward? Like you said, it's changing by the moment.
Yeah, look, it's not complicated, right? And like everything else, as you think about the Trump administration, is just do it right, do it inside the law. I don't think anybody objects to the idea that people who are in the country illegally, who have committed a crime, should be out of the country yesterday. But when you just put a whole bunch of them without any due process, without ever sort of doing any work, when you do it with the kind of competence that this administration has shown so far, when they fired the people who look after our nuclear weapons, when you do it that way, you end up doing exactly what they did, which is sending innocent people to some god-awful prison in El Salvador. So the message is very, very clear. Of course, get them out of the country, but do the hard work to make sure that you're not hurting innocent people when you do that.
All right. Well, Congressman Jim Hymas, I think we could probably go on for the whole rest of the show. There's so much to talk about, but we appreciate you being here with us, giving those updates from Washington. We hope to have you back here on CT25 again soon.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.